Over the weekend, you may have heard or seen reports of escalations, tensions, and of more violence in Israel and Judean Samaria, or the West Bank. Well, it's not just violence. It is Palestinian terrorism, and we're here to break it down for you. On Friday, the D family, originally from the UK, went on a family vacation for the Passover holiday near the border with Jordan. They were driving in two separate cars, the mother and her two daughters in one, and the father and other siblings in the other. Palestinian terrorists opened fire on the mother's car, causing it to swerve off the road. They then opened fire again at point-blank range, murdering 20-year-old Maya and 15-year-old Rina. Their mother, Lucy, is critically wounded and fighting for her life in the hospital. And all of this happened with their father and other siblings witnessing the attack from the car ahead. And then a few hours later on Friday night, a second terror attack, this time in Tel Aviv. A terrorist rammed his car into a group of tourists who were visiting Israel, murdering 35-year-old Alessandro Parini, a lawyer from Rome, and injuring several others. After the attacks, Palestinians celebrated in the streets and handed out candies. You may have also seen images this past week of Israel police clashes with Palestinians at the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque site in Jerusalem. But what's behind all this? Well, a group of Palestinian masked men blockaded themselves in the mosque with stones and weapons and intended to carry out attacks against Muslim and Jewish worshippers. Israel's police, which is tasked with security on the Temple Mount, went in to prevent these attacks and were consequently themselves attacked. You have to ask yourself, what kind of worshipper goes into a holy site with weapons and stones? But of course, Palestinian terror organization Hamas used these images to ignite violence and terror attacks, calling on all Muslims to defend the Al-Aqsa Mosque from the Israelis. These clashes sparked the current cycle of violence, which led to multiple rockets being fired into Israel from Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria, and also led to the terror attacks over the weekend. All these incidents are not random. They are a concerted effort by Hamas and backed by Iran to provoke violence against innocent Israeli civilians. So far in 2023, 18 people have been murdered in terrorist attacks, including brothers Hallel and Yagel Yaniv, and 6-year-old Yaakov and his brother, 8-year-old Ashel. Their only crime? Being Jewish and living here in Israel. It's time to get the facts straight and not be swayed by the Palestinian terrorist propaganda machine. A night of relative calm after a deadly weekend. Joining us now with more on the events of the past week in Israel is social media activist, attorney, and CEO of the International Legal Forum, Arsen Ostrovsky. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
So what was supposed to be a very happy Passover week has turned into a deadly one. Arsen, how is the world reporting on the events here in Israel, the rocket attacks and the terror attacks?
Well, unfortunately, when we're seeing the reporting on the events, both with respect to the rockets and specifically about the terrorist attacks on the Italian tourist and the two Israeli-British girls, we're really seeing something that is entirely one-sided and biased reporting when Palestinians are not even mentioned in the same breath as these attacks. One would presume that when we hear the phrase car ramming, that it is some kind of autonomous vehicle, that there is no perpetrator. In some cases, they will not even mention the victims or the very fact that this was a terror attack. Some refer to a car ramming attack or an incident for that matter. So this really is an egregious one-sided reporting that I think not only distorts the reality of what is on the ground, but also, on the other hand, really incites further violence and actions that we're seeing that ensues following this.
And now this weekend claimed the lives, as you said, of an Italian and UK nationals. What response did we see from these countries specifically?
Well, from There were two very different responses. From Italy, I think there was both from the Prime Minister to the Foreign Minister and the Ambassador here, there was really an outpouring of solidarity with the situation here in Israel. Obviously, condemnation unequivocally with respect to the terror attack, and also an expression of support for the Israeli people who had also witnessed the terrorist murder of the two girls, as well as the barrage of rockets. That I think can be contrasted to what we saw with the UK, with the British government, who condemned the attack, but it was more or less I would say a pro forma sort of a response, very cold-hearted. It was merely just, we condemn the attack, more or less. There was really no expression of outrage or grief, bearing in mind that these were also, the two victims were also British nationals, one of whom was a minor, and there was no specific indication from the British or reference to the fact this was actually a terror attack as well. So I think we can really contrast the two responses from the UK and Italy in this case.
You know, there's always the hope among many Israelis, I hear this in talking with a lot of people here in Israel, that the world will finally understand the situation, will show solidarity with terrorist victims, as they would do if it happened in any other country. So this really wasn't the case with this weekend's attacks, except for perhaps in Italy?
Certainly not. I mean, I think what we've seen beyond a shadow of a doubt, that there is one set of standards when we see Western victims from outside of Israel, another set of standards when we see Israeli victims of terror. We know for a fact that the international community, specifically the EU and the UN for that matter, they don't waste not a breath to single out or condemn Israel when it suits them. But when it is Palestinian perpetrators, when it is victims, Israeli victims of Palestinian terror, all of a sudden they seem to be allergic to calling out Palestinian terrorism. And I think that's important to bear in mind, because horrible, gruesome attacks, terror attacks like we've seen in the last few days, they don't occur in a vacuum. This is a direct result of a systematic and relentless Palestinian infrastructure of incitement headed both by Mahmoud Abbas and Hamas that justifies these kinds of attacks, incites violence and a worldview where these kinds of gruesome attacks are supposedly okay. And we need to call out the PA and the Hamas specifically, not coddle them and not protect them from these terror attacks.
And I want to talk a little bit about the Israeli people. You know, it's the Passover holiday, as we said. Immediately after the rocket fire stopped, immediately after the terrorist attacks, we saw Israelis going back to life as usual. What does this say about the resilience of the Israeli people?
I think you hit the nail on the coffin. We are an incredibly strong and resilient people, and sadly, this is not the first time, and not during the holidays, that unfortunately we have had to be on the receiving end of such gruesome acts of terror. And I think the real sort of difference here is, as we've seen, for example, following the attack on the Italian tourist Alessandro Parini in Tel Aviv, we saw Israelis going to donate blood, as well as coming to the scene of the terror attack, laying flowers and paying their respects. Whereas, on the other hand, we've seen in parts of the West Bank and Gaza, Palestinians handing out candy and sweets and celebrating the death of these innocent civilians. And I think that really goes to the core difference of between us and them.
Absolutely. All right, Arsen Ostrovsky, thank you so much for joining us today, and wishing you a happy Passover, a happy and calm Passover.
Thank you, likewise.
So we know the news is fast-paced, and we want to let you know that ILTV's new app is now available. So if you want to stay connected to the latest news from Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, download our app now on all your devices. It's available in the App Store for both Android and iPhone. And moving on, the nation of Israel is mourning, together with the D family that buried two sisters murdered over the weekend in the Jordan Valley. The mother remains in critical condition in the hospital, and the rest of the family shared tearful eulogies. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
Maya and Rena D., aged 20 and 15, were also British citizens and lived with their family in Efrat. They were killed while driving in the Jordan Valley while en route to Passover holiday, when their car was shot up by a Palestinian gunman that Israeli forces are still trying to track down. Their mother, Lucy D., was wounded in the attack and remains in life-threatening condition. Their father, Leo, broke down in tears as he spoke before the crowd that gathered in Kfar Etzion for the funeral.
is a slow one. 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. You were always an angel, and now you will always be our guardian angel.
Friends in Efrat remembered the Israeli British sisters that were killed and spoke of the tragedy that had befallen the entire community.
Just such positive, wonderful people with such a beautiful family, and it's heartbreaking. And I keep thinking, you know, is this real? You know, these girls, I saw them around. They're walking around. They're happy. They're smiling, and they're just gone for, you know, for no reason.
And doing good. Lucy was always full of smiles to everybody, and I just don't believe that she's right now in hospital between life and death.
This terrible terrorism is happening from one side to the other, and these wonderful children are being killed for no reason, and we can do better for them, and we have to do better for them.
The tragedy of the D family will long be imprinted on the collective memory of the Israeli nation.
And amid the current wave of terror in Judea and Samaria, a Passover holiday march with thousands of Israelis was held today, showing solidarity with the residents of the area and advocating for the creation of Evyatar as a new settlement. ILTV's William Sharon reports.
Of Israeli settlers set foot from Tapuach Junction and up to Evyatar outpost in Judea and Samaria on Monday in wake of recent spate of terror attacks. Their aim was to show solidarity with the residents of Judea and Samaria and to call for the establishment of Evyatar as an official settlement. Cabinet ministers and Knesset members from the religious Zionist party joined the march, which is protected by the IDF security forces all along the route. Among some of the ministers that joined the march was National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, as he was greeted by mixed reactions, as some yelled towards him that he was not fulfilling his commitment to protect Israel and its civilians. The effort to create a new settlement at the Evyatar outpost began in the immediate aftermath of the murder of Hillel and Yigal Yaniv in Hawara. Many in the march in favor of the expansion of the Israeli settlements. The efforts to create a new Jewish community at Evyatar have been reputedly thwarted by security forces, who promptly evacuated the settlers from the area. Despite IDF efforts, hundreds of settlers have continued to attempt to scale up the hill and gain access to the territory. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has ordered bolstered security presence across Judea and Samaria with the aim of better safeguarding against any further threats to the safety and security of the civilians in the region.
And now you may have heard of our next guest. He is a well-known Australian actor, best recognized for his role in the mega-popular series Vampire Diaries, among others. And recently, he's also taken on another role, that of supporting Israel. And so joining me now in the studio is Nate Buzolek. Thank you for joining us.
Nice. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So I have to ask, you are an Australian, you're not Jewish, you're not Israeli, and yet you have a very strong connection to Israel, a major supporter of Israel. Why?
Well, that's I guess a long story as to how my relationship with Israel has, formed over many years. But, truthfully, I'm a Christian. I believe that Jesus is the Messiah. And I guess the more I dived into the text, the more I start to understand, this God that we follow as Christians, that you realize he's a promise maker. He keeps covenants. And, we're living in a time where, for 2,000 years you could question God's promises. But in 2023, we see that he's brought this nation back into the land. And for 75 years, it's one of those things where, you can't debate whether God keeps his promises or not. Long ago, he made a promise to Abraham, and we can see how that has still exists today. So when I became a Christian, it was one of those things where, many Christians struggle to understand how to place Israel in the story. But the more you read the Bible, the more you understand God's word, you see that his covenant promise to this nation still stands. And it's actually a powerful thing for a Christian, because how am I ever supposed to trust any of the promises that God makes to me if I think that he's broken his promise to this people and his first covenant people? So it was just a lot of study. And then, I grew up in a very, very Muslim Middle Eastern community, very anti-Israel, and a lot of the lies and propaganda that gets spread about this nation was something that I was surrounded by at a young age. When I first came here, I realized that there's a lot of lies and mistruths about this nation. So as someone who believes in the truth, I believe that God is the truth ultimately, that you can't kind of just ignore what's happening here. And I think it's really important that we start sharing with the world, the truth of Israel, the truth of this people.
Absolutely. And now you've also spent a lot of time here in the country, and you're also bringing groups of people, groups of Christians to Israel. As you mentioned, you hear a lot of misinformation about the country.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the trips that you organize and sort of, how this affects the people that are coming on these trips?
Yeah, so in 2018, I felt a desire to bring Christians into the land to understand Israel, understand Judaism. I think that a lot of the teachings in the modern Western Christian church are a little misguided. As a Christian, many people sort of just live in this new covenant that we believe was promised in Jeremiah 31. And so a lot of Christians are sort of uneducated about all the covenant promises God made to Israel. So the most important thing is to bring Christians into the land, to expose them to the reality of this place, the promises that God made, the continuing promises that are still to come for the Jewish people, and really kind of get them to understand that as a Christian, there's no middle ground where we should stand when it comes to the battle that's really unfolding on social media. Especially the choice that many of the anti-Israeli movements have been, the pro-Palestinian movements, they've made a choice that terror and terrorism is going to be the means by which they bring about what their idea of justice is. And for us as Christians, we can't sit in the middle anymore. Once a nation of people have allowed such violent and horrific acts to take place and they're celebrated, they're glorified, and we've kind of witnessed this culture of death. We as Christians, it should be so simple for us to go, we need to stand with Israel. We need to support God's promises. We need to support God's covenant people, despite the cost.
And, you mentioned the cost. You're very vocal in your support for Israel, especially on social media, at a time when people are receiving a lot of hate for this support. And I know that you yourself are experiencing a lot of hate as well on social media. How do you respond to it? How do you deal with it?
That's the proof of love. If I only did this because there was some sort of benefit to myself, it wouldn't be love at all. And I think what's important for me is that even if the nation of Israel turned their back on me, even if Jewish people were at odds with who I am as a Christian, I would still support this nation as I do. And, for us as Christians, we believe that it was the love of Jesus that brought us into relationship. So, and it's a sacrificial love. And he actually says to his disciples that there's no greater form of love than one laying down his life for a friend. And so I see Israel as a friend because I know that Israel is the apple of God's eye. And if I don't know how to love those people, then I don't fully understand the God that I've chosen to follow. So the hate, the horrible things that get sent to me, I remember in 2021 when I first started really vocalizing the reality of what's happening in Israel, I was losing 100,000 followers a week.
Wow.
And a lot of people said to me in my industry and other actors, said, "You're crazy. You're going to lose everything for this. What for? Like, why are you so vocal about this nation? You're not Jewish. You're not Israeli." And I was trying to explain to them, this is how deeply I believe in the God of Israel. And this is how much I love him. And if there's no cost to me, then there's no love. So, it's been really sad and encouraging at the same time. It's encouraging because when I first came to Israel after 2021, where I was really vocal about what, Hamas was doing, firing, 5,000 plus missiles into this country, and no one was saying a word internationally, I was amazed at how many Israeli Jewish people would come to me and thank me. And they were just so grateful that one person in this world would actually stand up for them when so many stand against them blindly.
I think a lot of Israelis share that sentiment.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. The other sad thing was this. It made me realize that they have so few friends. So as encouraging as it was and as grateful as these people came to me, it broke my heart that they have nobody else. So it's just made me feel that this is such an important thing that I'm going to do. And if no one else stands with Israel in my industry and what I do because of the cost, I'll be there.
All right, Nate, thank you so much for your support of Israel and for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
And moving on, Ben Gurion Airport has recorded its busiest month ever. The Israel Airports Authority says that more passengers passed through the airport in March 2023 than in any previous month in history. Nearly 2 million passengers in 1 month on about 13,500 flights. That's a whopping 57% increase over March 2022. The national carrier El Al flew over 430,000 passengers and had the highest percentage of total traffic. The Hungarian budget airline Wizz Air was second with over 200,000 travelers, and the most popular destination was Dubai with nearly 120,000 passengers visiting the Emirati city, 60% more than a year ago. The most popular by nation was the U.S. with over 190,000 passengers. And in other news, many ILTV viewers have reached out to ask how they can be more connected to Israel, and especially to Israel's blossoming high-tech industry, investing in promising Israeli startups. Take a look. Israel is a powerhouse of technology and innovation, but have you ever wondered how you can become a part of this success story? Well, we're here at Exit Valley, a company that has sought out to ensure that everyone has a chance to invest in Israel's promising startups.
Exit Valley has led an actual revolution in the Israeli investment market, creating the first online investment platform.
We were the first to enable startup companies to raise funds directly from the public, allowing everyone to become part of the Startup Nation's success. By doing that, we basically created the Israeli crowd investing ecosystem, which keeps growing every year.
Indeed, to date, through the company's platform, over 100 companies have raised more than $70 million, creating amazing technologies, many great products, and hundreds of jobs in the Israeli economy.
We were able to create a comprehensive, fully digitalized investment solution. With Exit Valley, investors can diversify their portfolio based on their fields of interest, their amount they are willing to invest, and their preferences regarding risk-return ratio. This is by backing companies from various sectors and stages of development and by choosing different investment mechanisms.
So let's take a look at how it all works.
As part of my team mission, we're responsible for the incoming companies to the Exit Valley platform. In our day-to-day routine, we review about 40 to 50 companies each month, and eventually we proceed with the ones we find most promising and attractive. We've established strong partnership with organizations involved in early-stage innovation, from VCs to incubators and universities, enabling our investor community to co-invest and participate in the funding round with optimal terms.
Once a promising startup is chosen, the legal department comes into the picture to ensure the rights of the investors.
Exit Valley, alongside the leading law firms in the field, have created a uniform legal infrastructure of binding standards, placing emphasis on the simplicity of the procedure. Each fundraising company undergoes a thorough legal review and analysis. What is most important for us here in Exit Valley is to ensure that our investors get the widest set of legal rights possible. Our investors come first.
Once Exit Valley has vetted the startups and ensured its clients get the most out of their investment, it helps prepare the startups for their debut.
We provide investors assistance throughout the entire investment process. From choosing the investment opportunity to assessing the deal profitability, the relevant information is presented in a user-friendly interface and allow the investment to be completed in just a few clicks. Our investor relation team is available anytime to discuss the exciting opportunities on our platform, provide more information, or assist with the investment process.
So now that we've learned all about how to invest in the startup nation, you can visit Exit Valley to take part in this exciting future. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Rainy showers are expected around most of the country tonight, with lows of around 13 degrees Celsius or 57 Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see more rainy showers alongside steady top temperatures, seeing highs of about 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Lajar Gavelazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.